thought you might be doing it for effect. It sounded very stadium announcing.
You now first understand how Moshe sounded on Mount Sinai.
Awesome. All right, we want to get to our special guest. So, Rabbi Yogev, will you give us our trivia question, which we'll answer at the end of the episode?
Yes, here's our trivia question for the day. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. That's not the question, just me saying hi. Okay, so the question for today is, at the end of our double parsha, we learn about the second tithe, Maaser Sheni. We remove that from our crop, and then we eat it in this location. Anywhere, land of Israel, Jerusalem, or the temple. Those are your options. You can put them in the chat bar. You can put them on Facebook. I'm going to try to be monitoring them, and we'll see who's correct. I think there's a nice message connected to it. So I'll share that with you.
There's a question
near the end.
Remember, we use the second tithe from the crop. Where could you eat it?
Okay, so that's it.
Okay, so we will get to that trivia question and answer later.
Try to plug it in the chat bar if you can.
What's that? Yeah, you can put the info into the chat. It is very much my pleasure and honor to introduce our special guest for this evening. We began a conversation last week about Hasidim, about the Hasidic movement, about the Hasidic community, and we really touched on it very lightly, mentioning shtisel, mentioning unorthodox, but we really didn't get into the depth of the Hasidic community. And in order to get into that, there's really no better person than to have on than one of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, who's joining us this evening. He was my Rebbe during my first year in rabbinical school in Yeshiva for Gemara, and it was absolutely some of the best learning that I had in my entire life. I think maybe the best learning that I had in my entire life. Really just getting to the depths of Gemara and Rishonim and the way Achronim and the way that our sages thought. But he's been much more than that to me than just a Gemara Rebbe. He's been someone who I've talked to and looked to for guidance over the years. He also happens to have grown up in the Satmar community with close connections to the top of the Satmar community, as well as having received smicha within the Satmar community. He gave a Daf Yomi Shir, a very, very popular Daf Yomi Shir in Borough Park for 10 years. And he's one of the few people that I've encountered who left that community, but still has some very, very positive and some very good things to say about the community. So we are so grateful that he has agreed to join us this evening to talk to us, and welcome onto the show, Rav Katz.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Rav Katz.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
A little bit louder.
A little louder.
Okay. Better now?
Yes.
Okay.
So Rav Katz, first of all, a mazel tov to you on your son Avi's first place finish in Chidon Tanakh for middle school.
Absolutely. It is a
Mazal
big deal.
tov.
Special
That's
big deal.
Hot off the presses.
Exactly.
And you mentioned in your Facebook post on that, and by the way, Rav Katz is very active on Facebook. He takes that as an opportunity for teaching Torah, and we'll be posting his Facebook page in the chat at some point this evening, so you can all check it out, and you can join, and you can get to see his incredible Torah that he puts out.
His posts are some of the more thought-provoking posts on all of Facebook, in all honesty.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Yogev.
So you mentioned there that you don't get credit for his Tanakh success, though I would probably beg to differ, but you say you don't get credit because you don't learn all that much Tanakh growing up in the Satmar community. So I was wondering if you could first start by telling us a little bit about what it was like growing up.
Yeah, so good. First of all, good evening again. First of all, the rabbi team at Beth Tefillah, and especially for Rav Chai and Rav Eli, two people who were my students, who I'm now proud to call colleagues. And if ever there was a truth to the statement the rabbis tell us, mitalmidai yoter mikulam, I would say that both of you, the two of you, have taught me as much, if not more, than I have taught you. I have very fond memories of the time at the yeshiva, both of you, when you were at the yeshiva, and our conversations. And those conversations still resonate with me. I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Rav Chai. Rav Chai has a special place in my family's heart because Rav Chai is the one person that my wife and I, both of us, were lucky to have as a student. Rabbi Chai was a student at Brooklyn College, where my wife teaches, and has taken many classes with my wife. And then I was privileged to teach you at the yeshiva. And then finally, just perusing the screen, I see a lot of very familiar faces, friends and acquaintances. I see Glenna waving her hand right now, and I know Mindy, you're somewhere there in the audience, and I'm sure I'm forgetting other names as well. So it's really a pleasure, and it's good to spend time together. In terms of your question of growing up in the Haredi community, I hope I'm not disappointing anybody in the audience, but I had an incredible childhood growing up in the Haredi community. As Rav Chai mentioned, I grew up in Williamsburg, and I went to the Satmar Yeshiva. I was the oldest of 7. I was the b'chor of 7. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, all of whom you might be surprised, get along very well with. I have a beautiful relationship with all of my siblings. My home was a very warm home, an incredibly warm home. My father, Zichrono Livracha, who passed away about 2 years ago, I hope he doesn't mind me using such terminology, was madly in love with my mom until the very last day. They had this incredibly passionate love relationship, which was very obvious at home. I have vivid memories of Friday night dinners when we would look at each other and say, okay, this is a little embarrassing. They were just so warm, and we're not talking about, physical. They obviously were a Haredi community. There was never any public physical expression of their love, but it was a deep, passionate love. If I have to pick the biggest gift that my parents gave me, I would say that that's the biggest gift they gave me, just a warm, loving home. My family was middle class. Don't be misled by what I'm going to say. My father was in the diamond industry, but not as a businessman. My father was a hard worker, a laborer, and still managed to provide for our family b'chavot, very comfortably. We lived very comfortably. He was an incredibly present father. My father and mother are very different people. My mom is a deeply intellectual person. My father, not necessarily. That's not the prism through which he explored life. He was more of a pashut person, worked hard. In addition to the hard work, he still, had a chavruta every day, in the morning for an hour and a half, and at night for about an hour and a half. He was out of the house by 5 a.m. every day, and he yet still managed to find time for his family. He was a very fun-loving father. I don't know, just really fun. I have vivid memories of him we used to tease him a lot. We used to tease my father a lot. And I have memories of us telling my father, you have 7 children. How much love do you have for each child? There's not much there. And he used to love to tell always the story about this woman who had 10 children. And they said to her, well, if you divide your love to your family in 10, how much love does each child get? And the woman would say, nah, I don't divide the love, I multiply it. And we would always tell my father, ha, 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 very, very funny. But it was true. He was just this most loving father. 2 quick things I'm just going to talk in terms of my family background is that I had two grandparents. I grew up with 2 grandparents and 1 great-grandparent. My 2 grandparents were very different from one another. My maternal grandparent, my mother's father, was a huge scholar, a huge Talmid Chacham. And I would credit him with my love for Torah. He really was a very prominent Rosh Yeshiva in the community. He taught for most of his life, loved learning. As a matter of fact, Rav Chai and Rav Eli must probably hear me say this story many times. In the Haredi community, when you're bar mitzvah, when you're about 13, you're expected to be in yeshiva at 6 a.m. Your day starts at 6 a.m. You learn about an hour and 50 minutes. You daven, learn. The day starts at 6 a.m. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, thought that 6 a.m. is for schleppers. serious learners start their day at 4:30. And when I turned 13, every day from 4:30 to 6, I had a chavruta with him. We covered most of Seder Kochim, which is the section of the Talmud that talks about sacrifices. And I have vivid memories because he was an old-style European grandfather, not very soft. And every morning at 4 a.m., the phone would ring. And there was no, hi, sweetie, do you want to get up? It was, Ysoschar, it's 4 o'clock. I'll see you in a half an hour. And boom, and you bet he saw me. But I'm indebted to him. I thank him for giving me the love of learning. My paternal grandfather, on the other hand, went through the Holocaust during his formative years. He did not have much of a yeshiva experience. And I certainly would not call him a Talmid Chacham. He was not very scholarly. But no matter how much I learned from my maternal grandfather's love for Torah, my paternal grandfather taught me what it means to love people. He just loved human beings. He was kind, he was loving, he was forgiving, he was supportive, and he also had a nasty sense of humor. He had a rough life. He was orphaned at a very young age, and in addition to that, during the Holocaust, he lost 2 of his siblings, one of whom was shot in front of him. But still, the way he survived, the way he dealt with it was through humor. I could go on all night, tell you his jokes, but I know that we want to get to other things. I will quickly tell one joke. And the reason why the joke is telling about my grandfather is because it was always self-deprecatory, either about himself or about his community. So the story he loved to tell always about the Holocaust is that during the Holocaust, he and 2 friends were in hiding for a long time. Chassidish yeshiva boys were in hiding for a long time. And at some point, they started feeling that they can't stay there anymore. They have to run. They have to go to a new hiding place. They knew if they're going to go to the new hiding place, then they'll be found out as they run in the street. So they got together the night before, and they decided that next morning they're going to dress up like Goyim, right? They're going to dress up like non-Jews. So that way, nobody's going to be able to identify them. Then they'll run to their new hiding place. The next morning, the 3 of them wake up. They look at each other. 2 of them are dressed up, not like yeshiva boys with a T-shirt, with a baseball cap. They look like Goyim. The 3rd one looks exactly the same. And they said to him, what happened? We said that we're dressing up. And he points to his shirt buttons. Does anybody know what distinguishes a Haredi shirt, a Haredi male shirt?
Let's see if any of our rabbis know. Rabbi Wahlberg, you know the answer?
Let me go get a few. 1 second. I'm just checking.
Okay. So
yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The way the buttons are.
Say it.
Your button
What
not
difference are
left,
buttons?
not left on right, but right on left. Everyone should do it. Everyone should do it.
So Haredi,
Chazan, you do not button your buttons that way. Don't tell everyone they should do it. I've seen how you button your buttons.
You buy yourself tomorrow new eyeglasses.
No, excuse me, gentlemen, you do not have to buy new shirts. Just wear your wife's blouses.
exactly. The way women's shirts button. Thank you,
That's
Rabbi.
all.
Absolutely.
That's what I do.
Law
Exactly. Okay, so Haredi men button right on left. We can go into that a different time, not for now. So the 3rd friend points to his shirt and said, look, I switched the buttons left to right. I look completely like a guy. And he thought it was fine and we'll be able to pass. My grandfather loved to tell this story. He was convinced that if he switches the buttons of his shirt, nobody will know that he's Jewish. What was even funnier, and with that I'll end, is that my grandfather would tell us who it was. This was a person in the community. And I shouldn't say this, it totally made sense. It totally fit that person would think, once you switch the buttons, you might as well convert out of Judaism. So those were my grandparents and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that for you, these are very personal things and personal stories. You once told me, which was very moving for me, that, you know, once you tell something, it's not your own, you've lost a little bit of it. It's not your own thing anymore. And I've thought about that often. So thank you for trusting us and sharing with us. What I find kind of interesting is, like, I wonder if people are sitting here saying, well, that sounds kind of normal and sort of boring. Like, where's the stuff, you know, wasn't there, like, that would make a bad movie. Well, that's why they don't put that stuff in the movies.
Exactly. Precisely. It was a normal life. Very
Rabbi
boring.
Goldberg, are you talking? You're muted. You got to unmute yourself.
My reaction was to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to learn. Why does anybody choose to leave such a community?
I don't have an answer.
Can you tell us also some experience, Hasidic experience, something special from your past also?
Okay.
What kind of Chassid were you?
What kind of what?
Were you Satmar?
Yes. I grew up Satmar, very hardcore Satmar. Rav Chai, where should I go?
Okay, so I want to get to why you left the community, but I want to get to that a little bit later, because while that's the part that people like are interested in, why'd you leave? One of the main pieces that we were hoping that people could understand is that there's a lot of beauty in this community. So what about that community do you miss most today?
Right. So, I mean, I want to caution everybody because I know the language we use is leave. I'm not sure exactly if that would be the term that I use. I'm no longer there, but I've not completely left. I'm still somewhat part of the community. To share something very personal, in fact, when I go back, I dress up the way Hasidim dress, with a shtreimel, with a bekisha, and I slip into that, culture very naturally, because there are a lot of things about that culture that I loved always and love just as much today. Again, coming back to my home was a spiritually robust home. It was a spiritually intense home, I would say, even. And it's interesting because the spirituality of my parents were very spiritual people, but it somehow seeped into their personal lives. There was almost like a spark between the two of them that had a spiritual flavor, a religious flavor. These two people saw each other as sacred to one another, sacred to their lives, and you felt it. You felt that there was something transcendental, something all-encompassing. Another thing that I miss, and I hope this doesn't mean that I'm not invited back, I grew up in a home with a lot of chumrah. There was a lot of stringency, good chumrah, good stringency, but my father was, very careful. We waited for Shabbat until the later time, Rabbeinu Tam. My father was very careful with the kind of food that are allowed into the house. The adult boys were expected not to eat anything outside of the sukkah, nothing, not a snack or anything else. On Pesach, we were not able to eat any outside food. Now, you're hearing this, and I'm assuming you're thinking, oh my God, what a tough life that was. It wasn't. I can't explain to you what it is that my parents did, but somehow they made us live that life, but with a certain tenderness, with a certain love, with a certain warmth. I never felt deprived. I felt that, on Pesach, we cut down on the material needs. On Sukkot, there are demands on how it is that we go about eating our food, or on Shabbat, we wait a little bit longer. And I really miss that terribly, because I know that to live that kind of life where religiosity can make demands of you without feeling deprived, without feeling denied, requires a certain context. I don't see necessarily how such a kind of life could be replicated outside of the Haredi context. And the other thing I'm going to say, and I know this is not a comfortable conversation for many modern Orthodox rabbis, is that I do miss the God consciousness. There was a very deep consciousness of God. There was no shame to talk about God. There was no discomfort to talk about God. And I know the context in which I operate today, that's not the case. I myself was in a pulpit for many years, and I know that I struggled a lot about talking about theology, and I understand why. Theology is a very complicated thing and raises a lot of complex questions. And I myself am, much more restrained when it comes to talk about theological issues. But I miss the fact that for them, there were not those levels of restraints. And if I can share something personal apropos of that, is that when my wife was expecting, our youngest child, I knew we were going to have a boy, and we were discussing the name of the child. I knew that no matter what the name is going to be, it has to have the word El in it, Aleph Lamed, God's name. Simply because I felt I need something to tap onto, something to point to that will bring me back into that place that I miss very terribly. And indeed, our baby, our youngest child's name is Gabriel, partially because there was the name Aleph Lamed, the words Aleph Lamed in the name. And the last thing I'll say, and we can go on and talk about a lot as well, the love for Torah, the dedication to learning, the dedication to intellectual engagement. Now, true, I got almost zero secular education, and I'm disappointed about that. But in terms of intellectual engagement with Judaism, an understanding that you can't go through your day unless you engage Judaism intellectually as a value that everybody cherishes, is something that I miss terribly. My father, as I mentioned before, worked very hard. He had to be in the office by 7 o'clock. But if that's the case, then he'll be in shul at 5 o'clock because he needs to engage with learning. I taught Daf Yomi, as Rav Chai mentioned. 100 people showed up every night. Every night, 7 nights a week, 365 days a year. Matzei Yom Kippur, Matzei Tisha B'Av. And that's an incredible thing.
Mitternacht also?
Say again?
Mitternacht also, or?
Yeah. So that's a long story, but we figured out a way to do it even on Mitternacht. Yes, absolutely. Tisha B'Av. So those are the three main things that come to my mind when I think about what I miss terribly. The spirituality, the love for Torah, and the ability to live a robust religious life.
Wow, thank you. So, Rabbi Walber, I would be curious to hear your response to those pieces.
Listen, I hear that, and I know what that sense of attachment is. Rabbi Katz, my father came here as a Satmar teenager.
Really?
And even though he totally broke in terms of Zionism, and he was an Orthodox rabbi in Borough Park, when it came to Yom Tovim, he still wanted to go back to see the Rebbe.
Yep.
And he would take the kids along. So I understand that sense of attachment. The thing is that to have what Rabbi Katz is describing means to give up on the rest of the world, means to give up on culture and science and a whole world around us. It means to build a wall to the outside world, not a bridge. And I don't know how many people can find that fulfilling. And I'll go a step further in saying, I'm not sure that that's what Judaism was meant to be. It's not what Maimonides, it's not what the Rambam or Samson Raphael Hirsch or Ibn Ezra or Rabbi Soloveitchik or a lot of others felt that true Yiddishkeit is meant to be?
Do I have the right to push back a little bit, or?
Oh,
would
you
that
could
be-
push. You
No,
could push back
no,
a
no,
lot.
no, no.
Watch this.
what
We're
we've been
gonna
waiting
mute Rabbi
for.
Goldberg, and you can push back as much as you want. Absolutely.
No,
Please.
Posner and Yogev are afraid of you, Rabbi Katz. No.
So I will push back against that, because I think that's my saddest experience in this modern Orthodox world, because people assume what Rabbi Goldberg said. People assume that a passion for Torah, a passion for spirituality, a passion for a robust theology is tied into their lifestyle, when it's not true. I tell people always, we conflate Hasidim with Hasidut. Satmar Chassidim, don't quote me on this, are not Hasidim. They're not theologically informed by Hasidic theology. They're Chassidish. They dress Chassidish. They eat Chassidish food. They don't live by a Hasidic theology at all. As a matter of fact, if you asked me to describe myself, I would say I'm modern Chassidish, not modern Orthodox. Because you can be Chassidish without a shtreimel, without a beketcha, without a wig. Chassidish is a way of life that embraces a robust Judaism. You can learn science. As a matter of fact, my pursuit of modernity, my pursuit of culture is deeply informed by my Hasidic theology, because I believe that there's divinity everywhere. Everywhere means in a movie, in an opera, in a novel. There is divinity everywhere. And I actually feel, I know I'm jumping the gun, but if I can take another minute or two, Rabbi Yogev and Rabbi Posen, especially since you're afraid of me, I will tell you my biggest lament. And I'll preface it by a story that I want to warn you, it's a sad story, it's a painful story, but it will illustrate my point. Years ago, this goes back 30 years ago. 30 years ago, my family befriended this Ger Tzedek. Shmuel Miller was his name. It's a long story. One of my cousins bumped into him on the street, took to him, and they became very, very good friends.
A convert.
A convert, yeah, a Ger Tzedek, a convert, correct, yeah. And I say his name because you don't know him. And we became very close. My family hosted him. We spent Shabbatot together. Shmuel gets married, has a family, 5 children, and everything is beautiful. Now, it's of course a setup. And like I said, I want to, it's a sad story. One day, out of the blue, he just walks out on his wife and disappears. No get, no nothing. And months go by, we can't locate Shmuel, we have no idea where he is. After several months, one of my cousins walks down the street and he sees Shmuel coming towards him, and there's a woman next to him. So my cousin goes over and says, "Hi, Shmuel," and Shmuel says, "Hi, meet my wife." I'm forgetting the name. And my cousin looks at him and says, "Wife? How do you have another wife? You never gave a divorce to your first wife." And Shmuel said something incredibly insightful and obnoxious. Shmuel said, "Listen, I converted into Judaism. I chose Judaism. In Judaism, there is Ashkenazi Judaism and Sephardi Judaism. Sephardi Jews back in Africa married multiple wives. I chose to be a Sephardi Jew. I can take more than one wife." Crazy story. And
I want to be a Sephardi Jew. I want to be a Sephardi Jew.
So why am I telling this story? Because the ethos is what pains me so much. Rav Soloveitchik comes to America. It's tabula rasa in America. There's very little observant and robust Judaism. It's a clean slate. He can plant Judaism in America, and he has 2 options. He can draw on a Litvish Judaism, hyper-rational, hyper-Maimonidean, radically halachicist, or he can turn to the different strand within Judaism, Chassidish Judaism. Passionate, spiritual, joyful, and he can still start YU. You can be a Chassid and still start a modern Orthodox institution, still go to university. And to my chagrin, to my personal chagrin, of those two options, Rabbi Soloveitchik chose the Litvish rational option. Modern Judaism would have been far more robust, in my opinion, if it draws on a Hasidic ethos, an ethos that believes that there is divinity and holiness everywhere. So when a kid goes to college and says, oh, I'm going to study Shakespeare, instead of most of the time today, modern Orthodox kids say, I study Shakespeare in spite of the fact that I'm Orthodox. I go to the theater in spite of the fact that I'm Orthodox. Hasidic theology would say, I read Shakespeare because I believe there is godliness in Shakespeare as well. I go to the theater because I think that music is sacred. I know that the impression that Rabbi Wolbeck shared now is an impression most of us have. We look at Hasidim and say, oh, I don't want any of that. I don't want any of that either, which is why I took off my Streimel, I took off my Bekesha. But
no, Rabbi Katz, I want to tell you something. It's not a matter of saying I don't want any of that, because the way you are describing Hasidism, Beth Tefillah is a Hasidic shul.
Great.
We do put an emphasis on Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha, on joy, and finding a spark of holiness in every single human being and in every aspect of society. There definitely is an element of Hasidism in our hearts and in our beliefs and practices. It's a matter of where you're drawing boundaries and where you're drawing lines. And listen, that's going to vary from community to community.
And I want to say, I would add, Rav Katz, I remember you making this distinction to me, and I found it very, very poignant. I think that the modern Orthodox community has started to move on from that Rabbi Soloveitchik hyper-rational. And by the way, that's why Yeshiva University hired a Hasidic mashkiach.
Right.
Because there's a realization. And you know what, Rabbi Wahlberg, when Beth Tefillah started and Rabbi Rosenblatt was here, it was a Litvish, rationalist, and as much as Rabbi Wahlberg, you talk about the Rambam and the rationalists and all that, you talk about that in your classes, but the way that you sort of carry yourself or have fashioned your pulpit, like you say, is much more in that sort of Hasidic kind of lens. So I think there's a distinction really to be drawn between like Hasidic thought, philosophy, and the Hasidic community, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And that's my sense sort of from Rav Katz, is that it was that community, that restricted kind of community, that you felt you wanted all the things you beautifully just talked about. It wasn't a matter of you couldn't have fun in the Hasidic community. You wanted to go someplace where you could have fun. It was a matter of these deeper elements, I think, and
Right. But having said that, I guess the big question then is that came up before, which is, why did I leave? And I would be remiss by ignoring the challenges. And I have to say that for myself, the story was a little different than usual. For those of you who are familiar with what's called OTD stories, people who leave the community, quite often it involves, painful and complicated experiences, people who come from broken homes, people who struggle with different challenges. That was not my experience at all. As I said before. I will say that one thing, I know the Chazan wanted a good story. So I was kicked out of Satmar, actually. I was actually asked to leave Satmar. And the reason I was asked to leave Satmar is because they once in the dorm under my bed found, this is when I usually like to pause and say, no, not what you thought. No, that's not what I found under my bed. So are you ready for this? I was asked to leave Satmar because they found under my bed a book with commentary from the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe. That was grounds for expulsion. I love to say I was in Satmar, you don't have to do drugs and sex to be countercultural. If you read Lubavitch books, you're a counterculturist and you get kicked out. It's a longer story. Satmar and Lubavitch didn't get along at the time, and reading Lubavitch literature was considered very rebellious. That was grounds for being kicked out. But that was not a reason for me to leave. I didn't leave because of that. I will tell you why.
That's like grounds. That's like grounds for admission into YCT, I think.
Exactly.
Into our yeshiva.
Exactly. Exactly. So why did I not stay there? So I'll tell you the truth. I have been so lucky in the community. Jewishly speaking, they've given me the most incredible Jewish education. I see Rabbi Wolberg leaning back on his library, and I'm looking at every book there, and I know I have the skills to take off every book on the shelf and just read it and know what's going on there. I grew up surrounded by...
Rav Katz, I hate to interrupt you, but all those books are in English. So
no. Oh, never mind. No, I can't read English that well. Then never mind. I thought it was Hebrew. I'm just kidding. And then I grew up surrounded by unbelievably smart women. Each one was smarter than the next. My mom is incredibly smart. My 3 sisters are unbelievably smart. My mom has 5 sisters, incredibly smart women. And at some point I realized, wow, they have almost zero access to this incredibly rich tradition only because they have the wrong chromosome. And that was really, really difficult for me to take. It just didn't make sense to me, and I'm not someone who believes women have to learn Talmud. I don't really believe women have to study, Rishonim and Halacha. But the fact that I had access to it and they didn't was really hard for me to take. And one thing I'll add to that, I know that Rabbi Posner and I had a lot of conversations about this. I had some conversations about this with Rabbi Yogav as well. So some of you might know I wrote a tshuva, a response on women getting aliyot, and I believe women could get aliyot halachically. And I know that not everybody in this Zoom room agrees with me, and I understand that. But I'm not going to lie that part of the impetus for exploring that question is because for myself, very few things compare spiritually to the experience of being called up to the Torah, being up close with the divine word, and that sensuality almost. There's almost a sensuousness to it of being so intimate with the divine word. And once again, thinking that my mom can never do that was really very hard for me. And, once you open the floodgates and you ask questions, then you start asking a lot of questions. So as time went by, I found myself growing further and further apart theologically from the community. And that's something that I'm still challenged with. We had on my block where I lived, there was this guy, his name was Yitzchak, and he was mentally not well. He was in the community, he was married, he had children, but he was mentally not well. And I used to always joke with my mom. I have a beautiful relationship with my mom. I still am very close to her. I'll tell you one line from her in a minute. But I used to tell my mom always, Ma, if there was ever chas v'sholem a murder on the block, and Yitzchak and you were the only witnesses, Yitzchak would be able to testify in a Jewish court, and you won't. And she would get so agitated to turn to my father and say, is that true? And my father said, Ysoschar is saying shtio, don't listen to him. But in a sweet, loving way. I remember, this was what I'm going to share with you before, is that, as Rav Chai mentioned, I am present on Facebook. And I made the mistake of letting my mom be my friend. So my mom is my friend on Facebook, and she sees everything I write. And when I wrote the tshuva about women getting aliyot, she sends me a message right away. And you have to know Yiddish to appreciate it, because otherwise you'll think it's hurtful. And she sees I posted that I wrote a tshuva about women getting aliyot, and she writes to me, Ysoschar, when did you become such a shegitz? But she meant it in the sweetest way possible. I know shegitz outside of a Yiddish context sounds horrible. In the Yiddish context, it's an endearing term for how did you become such a rebel and you're so proud of it. I think they're proud of me. I remember when I wrote a response, and with that I'll finish. One of my first responses was on nursing in shul, whether a woman can nurse in shul. And part of it had to do with the fact that I had a shul myself for 5 years in Brooklyn, and a lot of the people were young couples, people newlyweds, people who started families. And once upon a time, if there was a little baby in the family, then daddy would go to shul and mommy would stay home with a baby. So there was no problem about how to handle babies in shul. But today, that's not the case. Mommy wants to come to shul too. And then it raises the question whether or not children can be breastfed in shul or not. And this was my first tshuva, and I was so excited. I love the genre of tshuvot. It connects me to the 1,000-year of Jewish tradition of Torah learning and writing responsa. When I can, I write in Hebrew because I want to be part of that discourse. It was such an exciting moment for me. And I got along with my father very well. And I said, Daddy, I said, Tati, I didn't say Daddy. I said, Tati, I'm writing my first tshuva. And he said, really, what are you writing it about? I said, about nursing in shul. He said, why don't you write about someone who forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yavo and Rosh Chodesh? Why do you have to pick those topics? But he said it with the sweetest, kindest passion. And that's the complexity. That's the complexity. The complexity of, on the one hand, they have so much of what I cherish, so much of what I value, the spirituality, the passion, the way they model family when it works. I know in sometimes cases it doesn't work. And yet there's also a piece of me that feels so foreign theologically, so foreign religiously. And that's a tension that one has to live in. My wife and I joke, and with that I'll wrap up. My wife,
Rabbi Katz, guys, add a point. Guys, add a point
What?
quickly. As Rabbi Katz talking about being in between worlds, that's something like I just really appreciated about you throughout my yeshiva time. You don't lie about what's going on. You're one of the words you use a lot is grappling, and that's why you're always grappling with things and challenges, and you don't back away from them. And that's something that I think shining through now, and it's just something that
I appreciate that.
it's hard to do, and you're trying to straddle between the two worlds, so it's very unique.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Really kind of. So I was going to say, so my wife grew up Modern Orthodox. She's a professor of Jewish studies at Brooklyn College. Some of you know her, Dr. Sharon Flato. But she has a deep appreciation for the Haredi community. As a matter of fact, she has this incredible relationship with my mom. And I joke with her always, that was not the plan. You were not supposed to get along so well with my mom. What's going on there? But anyway, the joke in my family is that, sometimes 3-4 months will go by and we'll say to each other, oh, I wish we can get an invitation to Borough Park. Just spend a nice Shabbos there with the Zmirot, with the passion and all of that. And we get an invitation and we are there for Shabbos. By 2 p.m., we look at each other and we say, can you just get me out of here? We can't take this anymore. And both are true. Both are true. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Rav Katz, for being with us and for giving us the time. We diverted a little bit from our regular routine on here because we really felt like this was a topic that had to be given a little bit more time to really get into it a little bit. And I think you really gave that over so beautifully. It's all about nuance, and the reality is that nuance doesn't necessarily sell all that great in movies and in TV. Though I would argue that, like we talked about a little bit last week, that Shtisel was the first one to give a little bit of nuance, a nuance to the conversation. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up very shortly. I want to do something here for a moment, if I can pull this off. We'll go into our waiting room shortly. We'll go into our after party shortly. We have to still get our trivia answer. But I want to see if Dr. Shore is still here, because you mentioned, she is there. I see her. I'm going to, let's see if this works. Can I unmute you? Because you mentioned how you don't have to you don't have to dress like a chassid to be a chassid. And this is something I know that's close to the heart of Dr. Shore. Dr. Shore, did you want to say anything about that?
I did. The idea that Rabbi Katz had the courage to push back from Rabbi Wahlberg's position was really very heartening to me, because I do believe that you could be, oh, well, I'm glad
It's
you muted.
heartening to you. If a garbage man pushed back at me, you would be heartened.
Heartened, heartened, seriously heartened. The point really that I'm making is, first off, I said that earlier, and I've said this many times. Hasidism and Haredi Judaism are not the same. I mean, they are in the same family approximately. But remember, Rabbi Katz is talking about a certain approach to God, approach to Judaism. And I'm going to tell you that, as Rabbi Posner said, even Yeshiva University has begun to hire Hasidic Magid Shir, people who give the classes who are Hasidic, because it resonates with people. And Rabbi Soloveitchik was very close to Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, Lubavitch and Chassid and Satmar obviously are at odds with each other. The Rav very often uses Hasidic Torah. I mean, he was very close to, when he started talking about that with the transcendence, he absolutely talked Hasidic. But what Rabbi Posner wanted me to comment on, which I shall, is the following. I'm a Chassid. I come from Hasidic background. I am a Baditcheva Einikel, which Rabbi Katz would understand. My husband wears a gartel. He doesn't wear a shtreimel. He has a doctorate in psychology. I have a doctorate. My daughter has a doctorate. We believe in the world writ large, but we believe in a connection to God and a connection to Judaism and a connection to Jewish people and a connection to the beauty and the joy of Judaism that is absolutely underpinned by Hasidic philosophy. And so you could, I don't live in Borough Park or in Williamsburg. I would want to, that's a fact. My husband is from Borough Park, but he doesn't feel comfortable there anymore. Rabbi Wahlberg is from Borough Park, and it is now very much a Hasidic enclave. I wouldn't feel comfortable around them because they would look at me, frankly, like a hussy, because I don't look like them. I don't dress like them. To you all, I look very, very, what shall I say? You think it's Hasidic. My heart is very much Hasidic. Even my minhagim, my customs and my approach to Judaism is very Hasidic. The way I do Judaism would be, I would feel comfortable, a Chassid would feel comfortable at my table, without a question. That said, it doesn't hold me back from being, and my family, from being exposed to the world at large, not as an a priori acceptance, not as a, oh well, let's allow it. It's okay. I mean it as an obvious decision. Rabbi, what were you going to say?
So, Rabbi, so let's do like this.
I want to wrap it up.
That's what I'm setting up over here.
When you're ready, I want to wrap it up.
I'm giving you the last word. I want to say this. First of all, thank you very much, Rav Katz, for being with us and for the time and for just everything that you shared.
I'm sorry. Can I just say one thing? Rabbi Wahlberg and I have had a little on the phone discussion. I would love to hear Rabbi Katz at our school. And Rabbi Wahlberg's suggestion was that I would love to bring him down and have him give his view of Judaism so that they see that there is a way of doing passionate Judaism along with a certain level of modernity and scholarship. I would love to put him in front of our kids and help them understand that there are different ways of being Jewish and they're all authentic.
Thank you. Well, Rav Katz, you don't know what a big compliment it is that I brought you here. And now Dr. Shore is saying that she wants to bring you here also. This is a huge, huge compliment. There's a lot of momentous things going on here this evening. First of all, I think Beth Tefillah just became Chassidish. So this is big news for the future. You're all going to come back and you're going to find, you don't have to worry about social distancing because our mechitza is going to be so high that no one's going to be able to get near anyone else by the time we get back in there. So I want to ask Rav Eli to give us the trivia answer, and then Rav Wahlberg, the Morad Asra, to wrap us up.
Yeah, so our trivia question was, when you take off the second tithe, where do you have to eat it? So many answered Israel, temple. The answer is Jerusalem. You have to bring it to Jerusalem. Some people say it's so that you bring your food and your money to Jerusalem, you go there and learn, and you have food and what you need for the sake of recharging your batteries. And that's something that all of you are doing every week with us. It's wonderful. We have around 100 people on here just on Zoom. So it's a wonderful thing to fill up your batteries. And that's the whole idea. One explanation for the Maaser Sheni, the second tithe.
Morad Asra, take us home.
Okay, first of all, Rabbi Katz, this was a wonderful, wonderful experience. To the point, I was going to say that while you were speaking, Dr. Shore and I were talking to each other and saying how valuable it would be for our children to meet you and to hear from you and to give them a whole different perspective on Yiddishkeit. And we certainly are going to make that happen.
Thanks.
Second thing I wanted to mention is Dr. Shua mentioned that she's a Barditcheva. There was Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, who was the great Hasidic master, that the descendants called themselves Barditchevas. I want to tell you something. I once drove 11 hours in the Ukraine to go to the grave of Reb Levi Yitzchak. We got there at 11 o'clock at night, and I stood over the kever of Reb Levi Yitzchak, and I asked him, "Are you related to Tzipi Shua?" Never heard of her. Never heard of her. Okay. The last thing I want to tell you is I want to show you the Hasidic side of me. Rabbi Posner and Rabbi Yogev spoke about how much they learned from Rabbi Katz. But they've learned things from me that even he, in his Hasidic tradition, has not taught them. I've taught them how to be a real Hasidic Rebbe. So first, let me put on my hat. And now, let me tell you. Ask Rabbi Yogev and Rabbi Posner if Rabbi Katz or anybody else ever taught them that when they call a member of the congregation, this is what they should be saying.
I'm never going to get that image out of my head.
So we want all of you to know that we genuinely love all of you. It's so good to see you, but it's not the same as giving a hug in person, and that day will come as well. Take good care of yourselves. Stay in, stay well.
Thank you. Everyone, be well, Rav Katz. Thank you so much again. And for those interested, we will stay on for the after party. If you would like to stay on Zoom and chat with us a little bit, we're happy to have you stay on. Rebbe, thank you so much.
Shar Koach, Rabbi Katz. Thank you.
All right. After party. Chazan, you're smiling greatly.
Yeah, no, this.
Listen.
Chazan, it's your second frozen. You just smile.
I didn't hear everything you said.
Devorah and Robert Brooks.
Yes, I got it.
Sitting too close to each other. 6 feet apart, please.
You're glad I made you stay.
Is Dr. Shore still there?
You want his number. Say, out here.
Dr. Shore, are you still there?
This has to go on.
Even when
That says
Rabbi, that hat is fabulous.
Rabbi, did you chase Dr. Shore away?
Left on her own free will.
Chazan, why are you smiling so much?
If you give me the chance,
I just found out we could be.
All right, hang on a second. Let me figure out who this
Our Chazan.
Chazan.
Rabbi Katz.
He's not on anymore.
I left, I see. Okay, no, because when we talk about Bet Tefillah being Chassidish, you
He's
know,
for dinner.
What?
He went
When
to Tio Pepe's. That's it.
what is this a kosher place?
Vegetarian.
Anyway.
Rabbi Wahlberg thinks that now, just because he's wearing a shtreimel, if he says a place is kosher, it's kosher.
I want everybody to look at Holly, how she is able to maintain that pose for 45 minutes is remarkable. Doesn't she look gorgeous?
Folks, you never know what's going to happen in the after party here about Tefillah. This is why we
Anyway,
stop recording.
I wanted to say a big shikoach, really. This was very meaningful and very good, very good.
Terrific.
You know, people should know about the Hasidic communities and especially to meet a guy like Rabbi Katz. That's very, very nice, very nice.
Yeah,
And
the reality is that he could have spoken for another 3 hours.
That's right,
and
that's right.
you would still be left with so much because the idea that you can know what a community is from talking for 10 minutes or watching a TV show is ridiculous.
Right, right. So this was very nice, excellent. And when he said about Beit Tefillah, you know, being Chassidish, that's very unique in Beit Tefillah. I remember when I came, it was a year or two after, and it was Simchat Torah. And I told Rabbi Wahlberg, you are there, Rabbi Wahlberg?
Yeah.
And I told you, I asked you Simchat Torah. Before the Akofes, I had a bunch of flags where it was written there, Yechi Adoneinu Moreinu V'Rabbeinu. And I asked you, can I hand it out?
Oh, I know the end of the story. Rabbi Wahlberg took out a Sharpie and he wrote Rav Wahlberg at the bottom of that.
No. I will tell you something even more powerful. Okay? Rabbi Wahlberg told me, what are you asking? By all means, give it out. That's only you, Rabbi Wahlberg, who could say it on the spot. And a big shikoach to you. And we are Lubavitch, we are Satmar, we are everything good in our shul.
You know what scares me about this? This is the way people usually talk about the rabbi after he dies.
or when the rabbi puts a shtreimel at night during the week.
No, I always wear this. It's in shul. I take it off.
If anyone has any more comments about Rabbi Wahlberg that talk in past tense, I'll be happy to unmute you. Well, for real, if anybody has anything they want to say, you can unmute yourselves.
Guys, I have to say goodbye because I have a chavrusa now on the telephone.
Yes, that's me. Take care, everybody, and be well.
Bye-bye.
Oh, phew, I thought they would never leave.
Rabbi Posner.
Yeah.
I want you to know, I think you've been to our house once, but hanging in our dining room is a picture of my great-grandfather, who was from Berditchev, Chaim Ben Moshe Heller, Niberditchev. So I have Berditchev connections. That's why I'm sorry that Dr. Shore left. Maybe we're related.
By the way,
yeah, we would have had an in, you know.
By the way,
she would have talked to me.
I saw Marty put in to the chat. Everyone should know that next Wednesday we have a special program for Yom Yerushalayim with our BT Lone Soldiers, a joint program with FIDF. I'll be interviewing 4 of them, a panel discussion. We're very proud of them, and it should be a very, very interesting discussion. So I invite everyone to join us. You'll see that it's listed. It's listed in our emails, and you'll see it highlighted even as we get closer. And next week we also have a special Yom Yerushalayim MeZOOMin, where we'll be joined by 2 of our former beloved shlichim, Dani Steiner and Chagai Lavi. They'll be joining us from Israel live. They'll be up in the middle of the night, but they're excited to join us and talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Yerushalayim. And we'll also get a cameo appearance from Morty Weinstein from 613, who's going to sing us a special song for Yerushalayim, and he will be leading a special Yom Yerushalayim Kabbalat Shabbat the next day. That's next Friday. So we have a lot of stuff going on. Pay attention. There's an incredible event by Israel Bonds, which they just let us know about and asked us to advertise, which we will send out to our people, which is going to have a major speaker, and I think people will be interested in that. Of course, I hope that everybody saw our information on Spotlight, which is unreal. We're going to have Howie Mandel back again, virtual, of course. And this Friday night for Kabbalat Shabbat, Brian Singer, our music director in school, is going to be leading a musical Kabbalat Shabbat. There's like a ton of stuff going on. I was worried when I heard that announcement by Hogan's, all the hard work we're putting in. I didn't want to see all of our virtual programming get, I'm just kidding. We're okay.
It's been good.
I have to tell you, having Howie Mandel virtual is going to be so wonderful for him because he won't have to touch anything.
Oh, absolutely. He's very happy about. Really very happy about what's going on. But just so people know, the OU has put out guidelines which recommends that shuls do not reopen in any way until at least 2 weeks have gone by for stage 1 reopening in whatever communities they're a part of. So, for example, even without the Baltimore County announcement today, we wouldn't have reopened for Shabbat. And it's very unlikely we'll be reopening for next Shabbat. The question will be after 2 weeks go by, but now the truth is we're not even in phase 1 of reopening in Baltimore County. I think we're in phase 0.5 or something like that. So we're keeping a close eye on it, obviously. And any reopening would be done, when we feel that it's really safe to do that. So for now, we're staying put where we are, but we've got a whole lot of great programs for all of you. And we're just thrilled that you all here and joined us. And we wish you a great evening and a Shabbat Shalom. And we hope that we'll see you tomorrow for Kabbalat Shabbat. Take care. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.